The stars had always been full of life. Thousands of species spread across millions of worlds, connected by trade routes and treaties that had lasted for tens of thousands of years. The galactic concord kept peace among them all. It was a union of the gentle, the wise, and the civilized. And then there was Earth. The Concord had discovered humanity 300 years ago. Their scouts had approached the blue-green world with curiosity, expecting to find another species ready to join the galactic family. What they found instead made them turn their ships around and never return. Earth was classified as a Category 9 death world, the highest rating possible. A planet where everything seemed designed to kill. The gravity was crushing. The weather was violent and unpredictable. The oceans were filled with monsters. The land crawled with predators that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of killing. Even the smallest creatures carried poisons and diseases that could wipe out entire populations. And somehow, possibly a species had not only survived there, but had thrived. They called themselves humans. The Concord watched from a safe distance. As these humans did something no other species had ever done, they conquered their own death world. They tamed fire. They built cities. They split atoms and reached for the stars. And through it all, they fought. They fought their planet. They fought their predators. They fought each other. Violence was written into their very genes. The Concord made a decision. Humanity was too dangerous to welcome, too unpredictable, too savage. They drew a line around Earth's solar system and declared it forbidden space. No contact. No trade. No acknowledgement. The humans would be left alone to destroy themselves, as all violent species eventually did, for 3 centuries. The galaxy pretended. Earth did not exist, but the universe had other plans. The Vethrok came from the void between galaxies. They were not a species in any normal sense. They were a swarm, a hive mind made of billions of creatures that shared one cold, hungry intelligence. They had consumed 100 galaxies before this one. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They only fed. When the Vethrok arrived, the Galactic Concord discovered that peace had made them weak. Their beautiful ships shattered like glass against the swarm. Their armies, trained only for ceremony and parade, crumbled in hours. World after world fell silent as the Vethrok consumed everything in their path. The Selenith were among the first to face extinction. They were a peaceful people. Scholars and artists who had never known war. Their homeworld Velthoria had been a center of learning for 50,000 years. Now it burned. Ambassador Lithri stood in a small ship fleeing the destruction. She watched through the viewport as Vethrok vessels tore through her world's defenses like they were made of paper. Millions were dying. Billions would follow. And she was powerless to stop it. The Concord had no answers. Their fleets were broken. Their leaders argued and blamed each other while entire civilizations disappeared. There was no hope left, except for one. Lithri thought of the forbidden world, the death world, the planet of monsters that the Concord had locked away and tried to forget. She thought of the humans and their endless violence, their terrifying persistence, their refusal to die no matter what the universe threw at them. It took her 3 weeks to reach Earth's solar system. The journey was illegal. If the Concord still existed when this was over, she would be imprisoned for breaking the quarantine. She did not care. Her people were dying. She would do anything to save them. The human fleet found her ship before she reached Earth. Their vessels surrounded her, dark and angular and covered in weapons. They looked nothing like Concord ships. They looked like predators. Lithari was brought before something called the United Terran Council. She stood in a great chamber filled with humans of all shapes and sizes. They watched her with eyes that held no fear, no uncertainty. These were not the eyes of prey animals. These were the eyes of hunters. At the center of the chamber sat Admiral Marcus Chen. He was old by human standards, his hair gray and his face lined with age. But his eyes were sharp and cold, and Lithari could see the predator lurking behind them. She told them everything. The Vethrok, the invasion, the fall of the Concord, the billions dead and the billions more who would die. She told them how her people had mocked humanity, called them monsters, locked them away out of fear. When she finished, silence filled the chamber. Admiral Chen studied her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. "You kept us caged for 300 years, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire chamber. "You called us savages, animals. You watched us from orbit and laughed at our wars, our struggles, our pain. You decided we were too dangerous to be trusted." Lethery lowered her head. Her bioluminescent skin flickered with shame. "Yes, we were wrong. We were afraid of what you were." She looked up at him, tears flowing from her 4 eyes. "Now I am begging you, please, help us. We have nowhere else to turn." Chen stood and walked toward her. He stopped just a few feet away, towering over her smaller form. Lethery fought the urge to flee. Every instinct told her she was standing before a predator. "You want monsters?" Chen asked. Lethery could not speak. She only nodded. Chen turned to face the council. Behind him, a massive holographic display flickered to life. It showed ships. Hundreds of ships hidden in the shadows of asteroids and the dark sides of moons. Ships that the galaxy had never seen. Ships that humanity had been building in secret for 3 centuries. The Deathworlder Armada. "Oh, we knew this day would come," Chen said. "We knew that eventually the galaxy would face something it could not defeat with words and treaties. Something that only understood one language." He turned back to Lethery. "Our language." The ambassador stared at the fleet on the display. It was massive, terrifying. And it had been waiting all this time. "We will help you," Chen said. "We will fight your war. We will face this enemy that has brought the mighty galactic concord to its knees." He stepped closer, and his voice dropped to something almost gentle. "But when this is over, things change. No more cages. No more quarantine. The galaxy will see what humanity really is." Lethery nodded frantically. "Anything. We will give you anything." Chen smiled, and there was something ancient in that smile. Something that had been forged in ice ages and extinction events and countless wars. "We do not want your thanks or your gifts," he said. "We just want the universe to know the truth. We are not monsters. We are protectors. And heaven help anything that threatens what we have chosen to protect." The Deathworlder Armada began to move. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Salanath delegation had never seen anything like it. They stood on the observation deck of the flagship, watching through the massive viewport as humanity's armada emerged from the darkness of space. Ship after ship appeared from hidden positions among asteroids and behind dead moons. They had been invisible until the moment they chose to be seen. The alien diplomats trembled at the sight. These were not like any vessels they had ever encountered. Concord ships were elegant and beautiful, built from crystal and flowing metal, designed to show grace and sophistication. Human ships were none of these things. They were brutal, angular, covered in thick armor, plating and bristling with weapons that the Selenith could not even identify. They looked like they had been built by a species that expected everything in the universe to try to kill them. Which, the delegation realized, was exactly the truth. Captain Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the TFS Perseverance. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a calm expression that never seemed to change. Around her, her crew worked with quiet efficiency. No panic, no wasted movement, just focus. A Salanef liaison named Korath had been assigned to her ship to provide information about the enemy. He stood near the back of the bridge, trying not to get in anyone's way. Every few minutes he flinched at some sound or movement. The humans noticed, but said nothing. "Captain," the tactical officer reported, "we are receiving updated intelligence from the Concord Remnant. The Vethrak fleet at Velthoria is not 2,000 ships, as originally reported." Tanaka raised an eyebrow. "How many?" 12,000, ma'am. "Possibly more." Korath made a sound like a wounded animal. His skin lost all color and he collapsed against the wall, sliding down to the floor. His people had no military training. They had never needed it. The idea of facing such overwhelming odds was more than his mind could process. The human crew barely reacted to the news. A few exchanged glances. Someone muttered something that might have been a curse, but no one panicked. No one despaired. Tanaka simply nodded. Then we adapt. Signal all ships. Emergency tactical meeting in 10 minutes. Korath stared at her in disbelief. You cannot be serious. 12,000 ships. Your fleet is 500. This is suicide. This is worse than suicide. This is mathematics. Tanaka turned to look at him. Her expression was patient, almost kind. Do you know anything about Earth, Liaison Korath? He shook his head weakly. For 4 billion years, our planet tried to kill everything on it. Ice ages that lasted millions of years. Asteroid impacts that wiped out most life. Supervolcanoes, plagues, predators everywhere you looked. She smiled slightly. And we are still here. Do you know why? Korath could not answer. Because we do not surrender to mathematics. We find another way. Always. The tactical meeting brought together the captains and admirals of the entire fleet through holographic communication. Admiral Chen stood at the center, surrounded by hundreds of floating images of human commanders. The Salanith observers watched from the edges, not understanding most of what was discussed. The humans did not talk like any military force the Concord had ever seen. They did not speak of formations and defensive lines and organized retreats. They spoke of chaos, confusion, misdirection. They talked about breaking into small groups and striking from unexpected angles. They discussed turning the enemy's numbers into a weakness rather than a strength. They called it wolf pack tactics. The Salanith had never seen a wolf, but they understood the concept. Small groups of predators working together to bring down prey much larger than themselves. It was a strategy that no Concord species had ever conceived. Why would they? None of them had been predators. Admiral Chen outlined the plan. The fleet would not meet the Vethrock in a single battle line. That was what the enemy expected. That was how every Concord fleet had died. Instead, they would scatter. Attack from multiple directions at once. Hit the enemy and vanish before they could respond. Target supply vessels and command ships. Turn the battle into 1,000 smaller fights, where numbers meant nothing. The Vethrak have never faced anything like us, Chen said. They have conquered species that fight according to rules and traditions. We have no rules. We have only survival. He looked around at his commanders. Make them fear the darkness between the stars. Make them wonder if we are behind every asteroid, inside every shadow. They want to be the predators? Show them what it feels like to be prey. The fleet began to move. Captain Tanaka watched from the bridge of the Perseverance as the Armada split into dozens of smaller groups. Each group vanished into the void, heading for different approach vectors toward the Salanith homeworld. Korath had recovered enough to stand, though he still looked pale and sick. I do not understand, he said quietly. You are outnumbered 20-1. Any rational calculation shows that you cannot win. Why are you not afraid? Tanaka considered the question. Fear is useful, she said. It keeps you alert, keeps you sharp. But fear only controls you if you let it. She gestured to her crew who were preparing for the coming battle with focused determination. Every human on this ship has ancestors who faced extinction and refused to die. That is what we are. We are the children of survivors. The Perseverance jumped to faster-than-light speed. The stars stretched into lines around them. 20 hours later, they arrived at the edge of the Velthoria system. The sight that greeted them was horrifying. The beautiful blue world hung in space, surrounded by a swarm of Vethrak ships. They covered the planet like locusts, thousands upon thousands of dark vessels with organic curves that seemed somehow wrong. Even at this distance, the crew could see the glow of burning cities on the planet's surface. Signal from Admiral Chen, the communications officer reported. All wolf packs in position. Attack begins in 3 minutes. Tanaka opened a channel to the entire ship. Her voice was calm and steady, the voice of someone who had accepted death and moved beyond it. This is the captain. In a few minutes, we engage an enemy that has destroyed civilizations older than human history. They have never been defeated. They've never known fear. She paused. Today, we teach them both." She closed the channel and looked out at the swarm of enemy ships. Somewhere on that planet, billions of innocent people were waiting to die. They had spent their entire existence fearing humanity. Now humanity was their only hope. "All weapons ready," she ordered. "Let's show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do." The first missiles launched, and the Battle of Velthoria began. The Vethrock had conquered 100 galaxies. They had consumed species beyond counting, absorbed their knowledge, stolen their memories. In all that time, across all those worlds, they had never experienced confusion in battle. They always knew what their enemies would do before they did it. Prey species were predictable. They formed lines. They held positions. They retreated when overwhelmed. The humans did none of these things. The first sign that something was different came when a wolf pack of 30 human ships appeared behind the Vethrock supply lines. They struck without warning, destroying fuel vessels and ammunition carriers, then vanished back into the void before the main fleet could respond. Minutes later, another group attacked from a completely different direction, then another, and another. The Vethrock commanders tried to organize a response, but there was nothing to respond to. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere. They did not fight like any species the swarm had ever encountered. They fought like predators hunting prey that did not realize it was being hunted. Captain Tanaka led her wolf pack through the chaos. The Perseverance dove between enemy formations, its weapons firing in all directions. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable than anything the Vethrock had seen. They took risks that seemed insane, flying through debris fields and skimming along the hulls of enemy vessels. "Enemy cruiser at bearing 270, the tactical officer called out. "It is turning to engage." Tanaka made a quick decision. "All ahead full. Ram approach." The bridge crew did not hesitate. The Perseverance accelerated directly toward the enemy ship. On the Vethrock cruiser, the hive mind controlling it experienced something like disbelief. No species deliberately flew into another ship. It was suicide. At the last possible moment, Tanaka gave the order. "All crew, emergency evacuation 2 pods. Now." The humans moved with practiced speed. They had drilled for this exact situation hundreds of times. Within seconds, the crew was in escape pods, ejecting from the ship as it continued its collision course. The Perseverance slammed into the Vethrock cruiser. Both ships erupted in a massive explosion that took out 3 other enemy vessels nearby. The escape pods scattered into space, each one containing human crew members, were already being picked up by other ships in the Welf pack. Tanaka landed on the deck of another vessel. The TFS, relentless, within minutes. She walked to the bridge without even a change of expression. "Status of my crew?" she asked. "All recovered, Captain. No casualties." She nodded once. "Good. Give me a ship." "We are not done yet." On the planet's surface below, the situation was even more desperate. The Vethrock had landed ground forces on every continent. They had herded the Selenith population into underground shelters, preparing for the final harvest. The alien invaders had done this thousands of times before. They knew how to break the spirit of conquered peoples. They knew how to make them stop hoping, and then the human dropships came. Lieutenant David Okonkwo was among the first to land. He and his squad hit the ground in a dead zone that the Vethrock had created around a major Selenith city. The air was filled with toxic particles. The radiation levels were lethal to most species. The temperature fluctuated wildly between extremes that would kill unprotected. Life in minutes, the Vethrock had created these conditions deliberately. They knew that no Selenith rescue force could survive here. They did not know about humans. Okonkwo breathed in the toxic air through his filtered mask and smiled grimly. "This reminds me of Mexico City on a bad day," he said to his squad. A few of them laughed. They moved through the devastation like ghosts. Their bodies had evolved on a world where the air itself could kill you if you breathed wrong. Their muscles were dense from a lifetime of fighting Earth's crushing gravity. Their reflexes were sharp from a million years of avoiding predators. They were Deathworlders, and this dead zone was just another Tuesday. The Vethrock ground forces never saw them coming. The first warning they had was when their forward positions simply stopped reporting. Then their supply depots exploded. Then their communications went silent. Okonkwo led his squad through a collapsed transit tunnel toward the shelter where thousands of Selenith civilians were being held. The Vethrak had placed guards at every entrance, confident that nothing could approach through the toxic wasteland it created. They were wrong. The squad emerged from the tunnel behind the guard position. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. Human weapons fired in disciplined bursts. Human hands wielded blades when ammunition ran low. Human strength crushed Vethrak bodies that had never evolved to resist such force. When it was over, Okonkwo stood before the shelter doors. He could hear sounds from inside. Frightened sounds. The Selenith knew something was happening, but could not understand what. "Open it," he ordered. The doors slid apart. Beyond them were thousands of Selenith civilians, huddled together in terror. They saw the armored figures standing in the doorway, and many of them screamed. They had heard stories of humans, stories of violence and war and death. They thought they were about to die. Okonkwo removed his helmet. His dark face was covered in sweat and grime, but his eyes were kind. "We are here to help," he said through his translator. "The monsters are outside. We are going to keep you safe." Young Selenith child, barely more than an infant, broke free from its parent and walked toward him. The others gasped in fear, but the child showed no hesitation. It looked up at the massive human with curious eyes. Okonkwo knelt down to its level. He reached out with one gloved hand, and the child took it without fear. "The scary things are all gone now," he said gently. "You are going to be okay." Above the planet, Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. The Vethrak fleet was in chaos. The Wolfpack tactics were working beyond anything they had hoped. Enemy ships were destroying each other in confusion, unable to identify which direction the next attack would come from.
Admiral,
His aide reported. Ground teams have secured 70% of the population centers. Civilian casualties are lower than projected.
out.
Chen nodded slowly. This was what they had trained for. This was what humanity did. Not just fighting. Not just killing, protecting, saving. "Tell all teams to push forward," he ordered. "We do not stop until every civilian is safe." The battle continued through the night, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Vethrak had met their match. The galaxy was witnessing something that had never happened before. A Deathworld species had come to fight. And it was fighting not for conquest, not for revenge, but for people it had never met. For a galaxy that had rejected it, the humans fought on. With every passing hour, the impossible became possible. The Vethrak Overmind was ancient beyond human comprehension. It had existed for millions of years, spreading across galaxies, consuming civilizations, absorbing the memories and knowledge of countless species. It had seen everything. It understood everything. Nothing in the universe could surprise it anymore until now. Data was poured into the collective consciousness from 100 different engagements around Velthoria. None of it made sense. The prey species called humans were not behaving according to any pattern the Overmind could recognize. They did not retreat when outnumbered. They did not surrender when surrounded. They did not break when their ships were destroyed. They just kept coming, adapting, changing their tactics faster than the hive mind could respond. Worse, they were winning. The Overmind studied the data again, looking for some explanation. These humans had smaller ships, fewer numbers, inferior technology by galactic standards. They should have been consumed in the first hour. Instead, they had turned the battle into chaos that the Vethrak could not control. One pattern emerged from the chaos. The humans were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to protect the Selenith. Every tactical decision they made prioritized civilian evacuation. Every risk they took was calculated to save more lives. This made no sense to the Vethrak. Why would any species sacrifice itself for another? Why would predators care about prey? On the bridge of the TFS Unconquered, Admiral Chen stood before a holographic display of the battlefield. The Vethrak fleet was in disarray. More than 3,000 enemy ships had been destroyed or disabled. Human losses were heavy too. but nowhere near what the mathematics had predicted. Admiral, his communications officer, spoke up. "We are receiving a transmission. It appears to be coming from the Vethrock command vessel." The bridge fell silent. In all their conquests, the Vethrak had never communicated with prey species. They had no need to. Prey did not deserve words. "Put it through," Chen ordered. The view screen flickered, and something appeared. It was not a face in any recognizable sense. It was a swirling mass of images and lights, fragments of stolen memories and absorbed consciousness. When it spoke, its voice was a chorus of thousands of voices layered over each other. Some of those voices sounded alien. Some sounded disturbingly human. "You are not like the others," the Overmind said. Chen stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His expression showed nothing. "No, we are not. We have watched you, studied you. You come from a world that should have killed you. Your own planet was your enemy, and you defeated it." The voices shifted, becoming more curious. "Why do you fight for those who rejected you? The Salanoth feared you. The Concord imprisoned you. You owe them nothing." It was a fair question. Chen had asked himself the same thing many times over the years. Why should humanity care about species that had treated them like dangerous animals? He had found his answer long ago, "'Cause that is what we are," he said simply. "We protect the weak. We stand against those who prey on the innocent. It does not matter if they love us or fear us. What matters is that they need help, and we can give it." The Overmind processed this response for several seconds. The concept was difficult for it to understand. In all its existence, it had never encountered a species that fought for others without expectation of reward or survival advantage. "You will lose eventually," the Overmind said. "We are infinite. We have consumed 100 galaxies. Your species is young and small. You cannot fight forever." Chen smiled slightly. It was not a friendly smile. "We have been hearing that for 4 billion years. Ice ages tried to kill us. We survived. Asteroid impacts tried to kill us. We survived. Plagues, predators, our own wars. Everything the universe threw at us, we survived. And we did not just survive. We came out stronger every time." He stepped closer to the view screen, and his voice dropped to something cold and hard. "You are just the latest thing that has tried to destroy us. You will fail like all the others." Ask the dinosaurs how it worked out for them. The Overmind did not respond immediately. Something was happening within the collective consciousness. Something that had not happened in 10,000 years of conquest. It was learning fear, not the fear of destruction. The Vethrak did not fear death in the way other species did. They were eternal, spread across countless bodies and vessels. No single loss could destroy them. This was different. This was the fear of meeting something that could not be consumed. Something that would fight until the very last breath, and then fight some more. Something that turned every defeat into a lesson and came back stronger. The humans were not prey. They were something else entirely. Something the universe had produced only once, on a single brutal world in an unremarkable corner of a small galaxy. "We will withdraw," the Overmind said finally. "For now, but we will return. We will study you. We will learn your weaknesses." Chen nodded slowly. "You are welcome to try. But know this. Every day you spend studying us, we grow stronger. Every weakness you find, we will eliminate. And the next time we meet, we will have allies. Because that is what we do. We build families. We protect them. And we never stop fighting for them." The transmission ended. Across the battlefield, the Vethrock fleet began to withdraw. They did not retreat in panic or disorder. They pulled back methodically, calculating, gathering data for the future. But they were leaving. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Vethrak had chosen not to fight. On ships throughout the human fleet, exhausted crews watched the enemy go. No one cheered. They were too tired, too drained. They had lost friends and ships and pieces of themselves. It would never come back, but they had one. Captain Tanaka stood on the bridge of her new vessel, watching the last Vethrock ships disappear into faster-than-light space. Beside her, Korith, the Selenith liaison was crying openly. His people were saved. His world, though damaged, would survive. "I do not understand," Korath said through his tears. "You sacrificed so much for us. Why?" Tanaka considered the question. She thought about Earth, about the endless struggle that had created humanity, about the billions of years of death and survival that had forged her species into what it was. "Because someone had to," she said. "And we could." On the surface of Elthoria, Lieutenant Okonkwo watched the sunrise with a group of Selenith children gathered around him. They had been terrified of humans just days ago. Now they clung to him like he was the safest thing in the universe. Maybe he was. He thought about the battle, about the friends he had lost, about the long war that was surely coming. The Vethrak would return. They always did. And humanity would be waiting for them. But that was tomorrow. Today, children were safe. A world was free. And for the first time in 300 years, humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy. The sun rose over the broken city. And with it came something that had almost died in this corner of the universe. Hope. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Elthoria. In that time, everything had changed. The human fleet had not stopped at one world. They pushed outward, responding to distress calls from dozens of systems that the Vethrak had invaded. Wherever the swarm had taken hold, humanity arrived with fire and fury in something the galaxy had never seen before. Mercy. They did not conquer. They did not demand payment or tribute. They simply fought, liberated, and moved on. Species that had never heard of Earth suddenly found themselves owing their existence to humans. The stories spread faster than any ship could travel. Stories of Deathworlders who came not to destroy, but to save. The Galactic Concord had shattered during the invasion. Most of its leadership had fled or died. But in the wake of the Vethrak withdrawal, something new was forming. Representatives from 100 different species were gathering at what remained of the Concord headquarters. They came to rebuild, and they came to talk about humanity. Ambassador Letheri stood before the assembled delegates. She had changed since that desperate journey to Earth. The fear that had once defined her, every thought was gone. In its place was something stronger. Purpose. "We called them Deathworlders as an insult," she said, her voice carrying through the great chamber. "We used that word to justify our fear, our exclusion, our cruelty. For 300 years we told ourselves that they were monsters who deserved to be caged." She paused, looking around at the gathered species. Many of them had lost everything. Many more would have died if not for human intervention. "We were fools," Lethari continued. "They are Deathworlders because death itself could not claim them. Their world tried to kill them for 4 billion years, and they refused to die. That is not a weakness. That is the greatest strength in the universe." The chamber was silent. Every delegate was thinking of the humans they had seen. The soldiers who fought without surrender, the medics who worked without rest, the engineers who rebuilt what had been destroyed, the ordinary people who had come from Earth to help strangers they had never met. "Today, we make a new beginning," Lethari said. "No more exclusion. No more fear. Humanity has earned its place among us. Not through conquest or intimidation, but through sacrifice and honor. They showed us what we had forgotten, that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to protect others despite that fear." Admiral Chen walked to the podium. He looked tired. The months since Valthoria had been long and hard, but his eyes were still sharp, still carrying that ancient fire. The delegates watched him approach with mixed emotions. Some still felt the old fear. They could not help it. Humans were terrifying in ways that no amount of gratitude could erase. But there was also something else now. Respect, admiration, hope. 3 centuries ago you locked us out," Chen said. His voice was quiet but firm. "You feared what we were. Maybe you were right too. We are violent. We are stubborn. We are sometimes cruel in ways that we regret. We are everything you accused us of being." He paused, letting the words settle. "But you forgot something important. The same forces that made us dangerous also made us something else. protectors, defenders. We did not evolve on a gentle world. We evolved on a world that demanded we fight for everything. And when you fight that hard for survival, you learn something valuable. You learn to value life, all life, not just your own. Chen looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from species he had saved, species that had once called his people monsters. The galaxy has a new pack now, he said. Not a concord. Not a collection of species too afraid to trust each other. A family. We will stand together. We will protect each other. And heaven help anything that threatens what we have built. The chamber erupted into sound. Not applause exactly. Many species did not express approval that way. But there was a release of emotion. A collective acknowledgement that something historic had just happened. The exclusion was over. Humanity was part of the galactic community, and nothing would ever be the same. On Velthoria, the rebuilding had begun. The cities that had burned were being reconstructed. The wounds in the planet's surface were being healed. It would take generations, but the Salanith would survive. More than survive. They would remember. Lieutenant Okonkwo had stayed behind after most of the human forces moved on. He had been assigned to help with reconstruction, but the truth was simpler. He had found something here that he had not expected. A home. The Salanith children who had been so afraid of him were now his constant companions. They followed him everywhere, asking endless questions about Earth, about humans, about the universe, beyond their broken world. He answered as best he could. One evening, as the sun set over the rebuilding city, a young Salanith named Mirith asked him the question that had been on her mind since the battle. "Why did you come?" she asked. "Your world did not send you. Your government did not order you. Why did you choose to stay and help us?" Okonkwo thought about it for a long time. He thought about his ancestors, about the struggles they had faced, about the world that had tried so hard to kill them and failed. He thought about what it meant to be human, because someone needed help, he said finally, and I could give it. That is all the reason anyone needs. Mirith considered this. Then she smiled, an expression that her species shared with humans, despite their different origins. "I think I understand," she said. "You are not monsters at all. You are just people who learned that the universe is hard, and you decided to make it softer for everyone else." Okonkwo laughed. It was the first time he had laughed in months. "That is probably the best way anyone has ever described us." In the void between galaxies, the Vethric, Overmind, watched and waited. It had not given up. It would never give up. The hunger that drove it was eternal. But something had changed. For the first time in millions of years, the Overmind was not just planning its next conquest. It was planning how to deal with an obstacle that it had never anticipated. A species that did not know how to quit. A species that fought for others as fiercely as it fought for itself. A species that turned every defeat into a lesson and every enemy into a motivation. The humans called themselves Deathworlders. The Overmind was beginning to understand what that truly meant. On Earth, in the quiet halls of the United Terran Council, a memorial was being constructed. It would bear the names of every human who had died in the liberation of the galaxy. There were too many names. There would always be too many names, but beneath the list, carved into stone that would last for millennia, were the words that Admiral Chen had chosen. We were forged by a world that wanted us dead. We rose anyway. And now, the galaxy will never face the darkness alone. The stars burned on, endless and eternal, and somewhere among them, a small species from a small planet had changed everything. Not through conquest. Not through fear, through love.